Doesn't have to. Are we going?
Yeah, we're going.
So welcome everybody to Lowry's Bookstore, Three Rivers, Michigan. And you see we have some refreshments up here from G&G's Cookies, which are really good. They make them right next door. And we got some Mooville milk from across the street at World Fair, which was 50% off. So good morning to buy local provisions. And I have my Support Local shirt, which we believe in doing. I even had my niece, Elizabeth Cole, make this for me. So this is the type of event we like to have to promote local books, since we are, like it says, eat, shop, write, read local. That's what we're about.
Yeah. Well, up to about 10:30 this morning, I wasn't sure whether I was going to be here. On Thursday, I tested positive on the rapid test for COVID. Took the other test yesterday, and I called this morning, and it came back negative. So I'm being very cautious anyway. I'm going to keep my mask on.
And you were vaccinated and everything.
I was vaccinated. It would have
Right.
been a breakthrough case.
Yeah.
So, and I have no symptoms whatsoever. But I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to set up this
This
deal here, and you're going to see her
live.
on
So
the
I
screen. And I had this little spiel about how she was being held hostage by this Delta variant
Yeah.
somewhere, and she ended up being able to join us. But so to set things up, if some of you saw, this is called the Hoppin' Authors event, and where that name comes from, I actually got asked that by somebody, and
me too.
and I said, well, it's because we both went to Hoppin' School, and which is 3 blocks down the street. It's an elementary school, and I went there from like 68 to 71. You were there.
I was there
your whole
from
time.
64 to 71.
And one of the things we'll talk about how it influenced our writing, but something that came out when I was talking to Hallie Stevenson from St. Joseph County Historical Society, and Becky Shanks know about this, is what a remarkable woman Ruth Hoppin was. And I think that's why it's so important to know your place and know your education. She was a first female graduate at the University of Michigan. She was a botanist, a scientist, which at that time for a woman was unheard of. I mean, she traveled, Becky knows more about this than I, she traveled to the South Pacific, where she was like diving for, aquatic specimens and whatever. I don't know what you wore diving then. It wasn't a helmet. It was probably like a big seaweeds, jigging for seaweeds. So she was an adventurous type. She taught at Oberlin College, and she came to Three Rivers. She was never married. And one of the ways that I got to know about her first was she came here. Her family were pioneers in Park Township, which is where I live. Center Park Church is out there. And she did this wonderful lyrical description of the prairie and what it looked like before white settlement. And it's beautiful, it's lyrically written, but it's also has all the botanical details that are really accurate. I showed it to a professor from Western later, said this is an incredible account. So just skilled and talented in many ways. But when I was a kid, you came in and here's this picture of this sort of lady in the stiff dress up in the hanging up there in the foyer. So it's important to know your history, and that's kind of what we're doing, although our history is a lot more recent than the 1860s. But
Yeah, I hope so. It sometimes feels like the 1860s, but
So we're going to start. We're going to start with. That's how we're going to do it. We're not going to be online, so we're going to start with you anyways. That was the plan.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna see how we tie stuff in local. Now, this one is definitely tied in local. This is my book called 2x4 by Murder. It was my first attempt to do a cozy mystery type thing, and there's at least one person that, if you've been around here quite a while, you would know who I was talking about. He is long gone, but he's one of the characters that used to walk around town. So anyway, this is based in the lumberyard where I actually happen to work. Although everything in there is fictional, the owners are fictional. The characters are based kind of on some of the old people I used to know there, but in this case, the lady owns the lumberyard, and in the lumberyard down there. In that case, the Huddleston family owns it, and none of them live around here, so I don't want to distance Huddleston Lumber from this lumberyard. But anyway, it starts out where this lady's father dies, and she has to go and start running the lumberyard. And in the midst of it, they find a murder victim under one of the barns.
Is that where the blood comes from, or not? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. Some background on this picture. This is an actual picture. This is actually my foot.
So your person of interest in that murder?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Oh
Right.
yeah. No, and the rest of it, of course, is photoshopped in. But a few years back, we had a flood down there. Had to pull up all the carpet. Had this wonderful wood flooring underneath the buildings, underneath all the carpets. And unfortunately, they covered it up again. But while it was uncovered, I took pictures. Anything more?
Well, I guess
need to say? Yeah.
if some people here haven't been, anybody here been to Huddleston Lumber? Have you been down there? So, just as a place to visit, because in this day and age, to have an independently owned small town, lumber yard is just really unheard of. I mean, you got Home Depot and Menards. It's kind of like Tom's bookstore. It's an anomaly. When he built his bookstore, people said, well, they'll just go to the malls in Portage. Well, they get some from Huddleston Lumber Yard that you don't get anywhere else. And you get longevity from employees. For how long you worked there? 60 years? What? No?
Gee, well, it feels
We're
like
the
it.
same age.
See, my dad worked there from 52 to 85. I started in 86. So I've been there 35 years.
So you've been there 35 years, and it's a cool place just to go and look around. And,
it's been part of my life all my life.
Right. So you know it. You know like every inch of that. Mm-hmm. And most every building.
Inside, yeah.
So in the book, Carrie comes back, and her father has died, and she moves back. So she comes back to Three Rivers, and getting away from a creepy boyfriend who shows up in the book in a way that creepy boyfriends do. You don't want them. And also, this other character pops up who I happen to know, this person whose body is found, and so it's a story of her sort of like finding out if she really wants to run her father's business in Three Rivers, or what's the name of it? It's not Three Rivers, the book you call it.
Herculaneum.
Herculaneum.
I don't know why I picked that. I guess I was thinking of Marcellus. I was thinking, Roman type things, and I know Herculaneum was one of the cities that got covered by Mount Vesuvius, but that was the name I came up with at the time. So I was trying to get that small town feel, but not be Three Rivers, but sort of based on Three Rivers, if you know what I mean.
So you're an accountant, right? So you're working bookkeeper, accountant, and during the day you're doing this. But we talked about as somebody who wants to write in a small town or any town where people know who you are and you're part of a community. So at night, as a fiction writer, what I think is really cool, because I write nonfiction, which is supposedly not made up, although people accuse me of that. But so you go home at night and you have this great power to write this story, and you can actually kill people in your book. You know what I mean? You can kill people and have them find a body in the lumberyard. So that's a lot of power.
I'm still trying to decide who to murder next. I think probably. I keep coming back to this one character that hasn't actually showed up, and it's going to be sort of a sad situation.
So the idea to have somebody like be a murder mystery, did you think of it being a different type of book, or did you feel like having that being that central part of the plot was just important for everything you wanted to say, or just for the drama? What sort of led you to have it be a murder?
In the past few years, I've been getting into mysteries and basically cozy mysteries. My mom was a mystery reader from way back. She loved Agatha Christie. And I had gotten into cozy mysteries because a friend writes, Facebook friend, not very close friend, but she writes cozy mysteries. And I thought, Cozy? Yeah,
I was going to ask you about
It's more where it's not like a hard-boiled mystery where they go around and they shoot guns at each other, and it's who are the hard-boiled?
More G-rated than that.
Yeah, well, that too, but more killed by poison, by knives, by off-screen. You know, it's not. You don't see blood and guts on screen.
Less graphic.
Yeah, less graphic. Now, Cozy, as far as I can see, are basically female-led sleuths. Who is it? Mike Hammer? Is that a...
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff, not like that. But they're mostly female-led sleuths. If you go by the formula, they're single and they fall in love with somebody, but I didn't. I kind of got into that.
I'm not all the way
but
through your
really.
books, so don't tell me there's a guy that I'm thinking that might happen. So don't.
That's
you know.
yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know yet.
There's a
because-
detective. I don't know what's going to happen there. He seems like he's a candidate. You know, she did say he had a nice butt, I believe, in there.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, maybe that's going somewhere. But,
Yeah. Well, this one series I'm thinking about, she had this other series the lady does. Main character has had two people propose to her, and they've gone all along through the series. It's about 5 books, and this latest book, I won't tell you who wrote it, but one got murdered and the other one was accused of the murder. So now she's rudderless. So I don't know how that's going to go, but
so cozy means that people just get killed nicely, right? Or in
yeah,
a sort of polite, less.
yeah, sort
less,
of like off screen.
right.
You know, nobody. You don't see somebody stabbed in the gut and all the guts pour out.
Okay.
Basically.
But you do find bodies underneath
yeah.
the lumberyard.
Yeah.
The
No,
floor of a
like-
lumberyard barn or something, storage barn like.
Like Agatha Christie
Yeah.
always used poisons, I think, or Murder on the Orient Express. I don't know if anybody's read that, but the person gets stabbed. But it's all off screen, so they just discover the body, basically.
Right. So, well, there's more. Obviously, you don't want to give
Yeah.
give it all away in the book, but it does build towards somebody who. There's a couple of plot lines because she's moving back here at a point in her life where she's disjointed, doesn't really want to take off overrunning this, and it's totally a male-dominated world too in the lumberyard. And she's there.
Oh,
as,
most
you know,
definitely. Most definitely.
and that's in real life too, right? I mean, I don't remember.
Oh, yeah. You know, I've had people call up. I don't generally answer the phone, but I've had people call up and they want the guys, and then they ask for a price for a 2x4. It's like, I can look that up. Give me a break, you know. But you know, if it gets beyond prices, of course I would give it to the guys because they know more about product than I do. But I can look up a price. But guys don't want to listen to me. A lot of the contractors don't.
So is it like therapeutic? I mean, I'm thinking places I work to go home and try to create a world where the stuff I have to deal with every day, all of a sudden, I can be in charge of how this situation turns out and how this person sort of gets theirs. I mean, not that you're being mistreated, but you are able to sort of.
Oh yeah,
use
it does. It does. I mean, my very first book was definitely my therapy book. So yeah, that was. I'm not sure. It's still out there, but probably the less said about it, the better.
Well, you got some other ones
Yeah.
here, but
Yeah.
like I said, the one thing we have in common because our books don't really connect other than that we're from the same place. But you know, growing up at Hoppin School, or I guess in a small town, in an elementary school, and then being rooted in the same place afterwards, because Hoppin School is right down the street. I know First Presbyterian. You're still a member of that congregation, that church.
Yeah, well, I started Methodist, but
You did.
went
So
to
you
the-
moved.
I went
You
to
got
the-
closer.
Yeah,
Even to,
went to the Presbyterian. Yeah.
And I was right across Lafayette Park. I lived in a house on 119 West Bennett. Went to Boy Scout meetings at First Presbyterian. My mother worked in the library, which is now the Carnegie Center. My dad ran Bill's Barber Lounge on West Michigan for 43 years, and he walked to work. So very much this self-contained small town, almost like a European village in the sense that everything was very walkable. You know, you had everything you needed. in downtown Three Rivers at the time. This is before the malls sort of really put the bite on local retail. And it was a world that was really walkable, accessible, but full of sort of adventures. And I thought, because, you had the Rocky and the Portage River, and I get in that in my book, where those are the places where you could go to be alone, experience nature, and you could play baseball on the fields at Hopenden. You could do that. Although one time we broke out a window in the Episcopal church, that didn't go over very well with the pastor there. But when you think back to what did you learn about? Was it just you, or was it your environment made you want to be a writer? That's what I'm trying to say. What combination made you think this is something you wanted to do?
I don't exactly know. I know probably like your mom. My mom read to me all the time. She was reading all the time. Now, she was a housewife. She didn't work outside the house. That was that generation, because she would have been 97 this year. That generation just basically, the man went out and worked and the wife stayed in the house. But she read a lot. She read to me a lot. Once I learned how to read, I read just about everything, including stuff I probably shouldn't have read at that time. There's one thing I read. I read Gulliver's Travels in 3rd grade. I haven't been able to read it since, because I'm going, I read this in 3rd grade. It's boring. Maybe I could read it now. I haven't tried, but no, I basically read everything. I did a little bit of writing in elementary school, but I didn't really get into it until middle school, and my English teacher had us write poems, and she said, "Oh, those are good. You should submit them here, or you should do this." And then I thought about it, and then at that point, when we went into high school, it was 9th grade. We didn't have a school newspaper. Nobody wanted to do school newspaper. A friend is persuaded one of the teachers to be our advisor, and we restarted a school newspaper, and then I started writing more for that.
What was it called? The Pause? What was that called?
No, that was Wildcat Weekly.
Wildcat
was
Weekly.
Before.
Okay.
Yeah, that was back when it was in the commercial.
Yeah, the newspaper used to give us column inches, man, to put the thing in there, but got to have the ad space now, I guess.
Yeah,
So.
and then at one point I started a humor column.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, at one point I started a humor column. I didn't use my real name. Nobody knew it. Had any idea who it was until the last column. And I used to get, apparently even they talked about it downtown in the coffee shop. So then I thought, maybe I could write. And then I was going to be a journalist, and didn't get like that. But that's another long story. But I've always had...
So you studied English at Western, right? Or was
yeah,
it education?
I was in English.
It was
well, yeah, I was going to be a teacher, and I got to my student teaching. It's like, I can't do this. There's no way I can do this.
If you guys want to have a seat, go ahead. This is very informal.
We just got to...
We prefer not to.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, no. I forgot my train of thought.
So this
Yeah.
sort of dormant. You did some stuff in high school. It's a lot more than I did, which is basically
Yeah,
nothing.
we did
But yeah.
Yeah, we did the Wildcat Weekly. At some point, the other gal just sort of dropped out of it, and then the last year we basically had a club. Charlotte Hubbard was
Wife's cousin. Right?
yeah, I believe was in that. I can't remember who else exactly, but I think I can't remember names anymore, but yeah, I actually started going again. Now I don't even know whether it's going. I have no idea.
I think it's really important. I think when you're young, some of these are formative experience. Oops, I don't need that. Whether it's your own children or a niece or a friend, you never know what a comment or a book or giving an opportunity to take them someplace is going to be. Even if it's to a library, or a museum, or talking to them about. some career in writing, because I know in my world, and I had wonderful parents, and I wouldn't change anything about my childhood, but there are some things that just you didn't think you could be, right? You know, you can't be. How did you become a writer? You know, I mean, what does that mean? I thought that would have meant writing novels or something like that. And later I've been in public relations, working for organizations, doing my own writing. It's the type of writing I wouldn't have thought of doing, but you know, in a kid's mind, and even with those,
These are warm.
okay, yeah, they
Yeah,
move
here.
over, so.
No, I'll put it back on. It just,
But anyway, like Lorraine did for writing those stories for the high school newspaper, you know, you're still taking notes. You're assembling information. You know what I mean. It is still practice that plants a seed. And later on, when you think about doing it, you had some experience.
yeah. See, the first teacher who did it was Mrs. Longnecker. You remember
I do.
Wilda Longnecker? Yeah.
I do.
And then I think young Mrs. Stuckey, Jan Stuckey, and then Mrs. Erickson, who is now Barb Penny.
Right.
Yeah, so
She
was
would still
a
work for
third teacher.
WLCAM, and she used to be a
Yeah, as far as I
she
know, she
still
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But she was our advisor.
You know, one thing I remember when I was at Hoppin School was that I had a teacher, Mrs. Weatherby, had this beautiful big beehive hairdo, which you could only have in the 60s, man. I think it was up there. And incredible cursive, you know, that she would write on the board. It was just perfect. The writing assignment she gave us, and I think it was easier then. Maybe you didn't have a school curriculum that mandated that you had to use a certain rubric, as they call it, or whatever. But we had more latitude to write about the things we wanted to write about. And I remember writing about, this sounds dumb now, but you know, it was a classic, how did you spend your summer vacation? Pick an instance from that and really write about it. And it was different than getting a writing prompt, because you were invited to really do this sort of just self-discovery and exploration into your life and talk about things that were important to you. You know, and mention facts about your town and the things that you did that seem significant, and they are significant, but it's different than having to do a sort of manufactured assignment. And I would write about Lafayette Park. We used to have these sandlot football games. All these things were pretty mundane, but it gives you sort of a sense of power or control over your life to be able to write about something and be in charge of that. And I think that was the first time I thought about writing. I remember really clearly. I was in fourth grade. I was walking home to school. I had this really short, you hop in school across Lafayette Park. It's like a 3-minute walk. I would still lose homework on the way to school and find it in the spring after snow melted. But so I'm walking home, and in my mind, it's a beautiful fall day, these gorgeous maple trees like we have in Three Rivers. And I started thinking about that, and I heard this like voice in my mind describing things. It was describing what the trees looked like, describing the weather. I remember just sort of stopping, and I'm like, what is that? You know what I mean? It was kind of unusual, because to hear, just listen to yourself in a writer's voice is the first time that emerged as somebody who's actually describing something. You know, my brain has started to work that way. And I didn't quite know what it was, but I did know. I said, this isn't normal. You know, I said, I don't think other kids are hearing this. And it wasn't like I was hearing some disembodied voice. It was my own self, you know, starting to describe things in a way that what writers do. And I just kind of followed away. Okay, that's interesting. You know, so I don't know if you had that feeling writing where, you know.
Well, part of the problem is, you knew me in high school. I didn't talk to anybody in high school. I was scared to talk to anybody in high school, basically. And I used to have basically conversations with myself, you know. And that's where I started developing a writer's voice. I had conversations with myself. I'd think, oh, I should have said this.
Inner dialogue.
Inner dialogue,
right.
yeah. Oh, because I never was that quick-witted talking. You know, somebody say something to me, and I'd go sort of like that. And then later I'd think, oh, I should have said this. I should have said this. And I'd hold whole conversations in my mind. And that's where I started dialogue and so forth.
So
You know,
I think,
basically,
I think that the part of sometimes being a writer, it does set you apart, because other people, it doesn't mean they don't think about writing, but sort of the internal process that's going on, the personality it takes, which is sort of inclusive, you know, and reclusive would be the word.
Oh, yeah.
Because it takes some self-reflection, and that takes a different form for a writer. You're actually
Yeah.
developing that muscle, and you didn't know it, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was very reclusive in high school. I was voted most shy in high school. I don't know. I should have brought my yearbook down. Yeah.
That's funny. I used to hear that in a small town. It was probably different then. It was when you graduated high school, you're going to look back on this as being the best days of your life. And I used to think, holy cow, I'm in for a crappy life. Because
Yeah.
the idea was back then it was more common, at least in a small town, to get married in 1920 and have kids, right? And that could be true
Exactly.
for that, right? Those were the carefree days. But, there's so much growth that has to go on. And if you're not a person who does all that in high school, then it's very awkward. I mean, I was terrified of girls.
Well,
Still am, sort of.
yeah. Well,
But,
Well, my sister, both my sisters said, wait till you're 25 to get married. And I look at them now and say, hey, can I get married now? Can I get married now? I never found anybody. So, they
well,
laugh at
Ruth
me.
Hoppen didn't either. She did okay.
Yeah.
So, another thing we talked about the other night, there's people, and there could be people here who have written or want to write, or always want to know where they want to publish. So if you want to use your home ground as fodder for your writing, what would you say to people, or what are some things to keep in mind, some things that you've tried not to do?
I try not to base too much on anybody real. A lot of these characters are combinations of people that I actually knew. The murder victim is actually kind of based on that certain sort of person, but I made up a background for him. I never knew this guy's background, that he used to walk around town and did stuff. I never knew his background. So I made up a background for him that he was kind of what they used to call shell-shocked, and was never normal after World War II. So, and they lost his family and so forth. But, I don't, that's why they say the characters are not based on anybody living or what's the terminology?
Deceased?
Living or deceased, yeah.
Or found underneath the floor of a lumberyard?
Yeah, found
right?
underneath the
Right.
floor of a lumberyard, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because you picked this person, and I knew this guy. So he was a guy who was a fixture around town. Small towns, cities have these people who you see all the time. They're wandering around. And it's strange because everybody knows him, but then again, nobody knows him. Because I don't think we knew his personal story.
No.
We knew that he was given a ride to Centerville and people, but you don't know what it made it
I
that
don't
way.
know.
Probably a few
Yeah.
people did, but generally it was
Wondering.
just this persona of this guy who wandered around, had this big long tube, used to pretend he was broadcasting on the radio.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
He could have been the guy that is always riding the bicycle in a small town with a zillion flags on it with a funny hat. Could be
Yeah, I
this,
gave him,
that person.
Yeah, I gave him a right
But
once.
you didn't. You just showed him respect, right? Because this guy was a combat
yeah.
veteran. He had so
yeah,
it wasn't
this guy
like
was
you.
this guy, the character
Right.
is a combat veteran, and basically just had trouble coming back.
Yeah, and I don't know the story of this other fellow.
Yeah,
And
I have
neither
no
did
clue.
my mother.
No,
You know?
I don't think anybody did really.
Because I remember telling my mom, I said, "You guy's really old, but he looks really healthy." She says, "What's he have to worry about? I mean, he comes to town and hangs around and gets a cup of coffee and whatever." But
Yeah,
so that's
people-
one thing is if you can sort of take the essence of the person, but not get too personal. Because I mean,
Yeah.
there is, it could be. I know
Well-
there could be libel if you were writing
Oh,
about
yeah.
somebody in a way that was recognizable.
Well,
you know?
and the mentor is based on a couple people the mentor of this lady is based on a couple people that I knew. Some of the other yard workers are based on people that I used to know, but it's basically a character type, not necessarily.
you guys want
Just
to
wondering
share?
what the name of the book was. No,
Oh.
we got to go.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
It's up front,
Okay.
2x4 by
Yeah,
murder.
yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and like I put in the front, it's not based on any of the guys that are there now. So I wanted to make very sure that nobody mistaked them for any of our current workers because it's entirely turned over since I started. I think I'm the longest lasting worker down there. So
So do you feel like the book accomplished what you wanted to say? I mean, what does it feel
Yeah.
like now that you're done? What do you feel you accomplished with the book and with your life that was important to put, frankly, a lot of hours after work when you're tired or
Well,
whatever into?
I'm just, what happened is I wrote it about 4 or 5 years ago, just sort of dropped it. I don't know what happened. It just sort of dropped it. Then during COVID, I thought, I'm not doing a whole lot. Why don't I go ahead and edit it and see what's going on? And then I farmed it out to a few people. One of the ladies, there's a few ladies that I gave it out to, and I've since developed a few more people that will actually look at my stuff. Sad to say, one of the main editor passed away shortly after it was published. Actually a heart attack, but I was so sad to hear that. Sorry. Because I had known her for many, many years, and she was a great editor. I started in what they call fan fiction, which is basically unlicensed fiction on TV shows.
What do you mean by unlicensed?
Unlicensed. If you write anything about Star Trek and you don't go through pocketbooks,
Oh, right.
that is very unlicensed. But there's an underground network that has fiction, that prints fiction, and the studios are aware of it. As long as you don't make money, they
Their copyright lawyers don't come after you.
Yeah, they ignore it. But she was a great fan fiction editor, and I'd known her for many, many years.
So I guess she's in the book in the sense that she had influence on it in probably ways that only you know, in terms of
Oh yeah.
shaping the plot or making things better or
Oh yeah.
finding things that are in there somewhere.
She worked with me a lot on my fan fiction and basically helped me a lot. But what do you do?
That's a really generous thing to do. Good editors are
Yeah. Well, after she passed away, I put out, who can look at my fan fiction, and this one gentleman said, as long as you're all right with me being rough with you, I'll do it. He is a published author and a published editor. I won't say his name, but I thought, holy cow, I'll do it. I'll take advantage of him.
So, and that's hard to do too, because your
Yeah.
writing is so personal, and
Yeah.
and it's tough because you need I was talking to Robert about that. You need good editing, and sometimes good editing is painful. I think it's something about that in Scripture in Hebrews about all discipline at the time is painful and hard to receive, but it has benefit. But you can also get bad advice from people who just don't understand something and are way off base. So being able to moderate that or pick who your mentor is, because hopefully they're doing it for your own benefit. It can make you a better writer, but it can also. So you're really fortunate to get a good editor and somebody you trust and respect.
She was tough where she had to be. This does not work for me. Put this out. Take this out. Okay, that's a lot of learning. Well, the first year we did the Wildcat Weekly, Mrs. Longnecker would edit the articles, and I learned quite a bit from the way she edited. Okay, I can't do this. I can do this. I can't do this. She was very good about that.
And that's really it. So much editing, at least
Yeah.
for nonfiction, is not telling you what you can't do, and how to compress words, and how to improve organization, and how to really just make sense for people, right? Because I know my journalism professor used to say the easiest thing in the world to do is to stop reading. In other words, I paid 50 cents for this newspaper, $3 or $4 for this magazine. If I'm in 3 graphs and it's not good, I'm on to something else, or even worse, on your screen where there's so much you can flick and scroll through. But especially for fiction, because it's and I don't write fiction, so I have no idea how you do it. But the arc of
Yeah.
the plot, you don't know when something's not right, but you feel it. It's like, that just kind of clunks, or that
Yeah.
drags too much here. That's
There-
not moving like it's supposed to move, you know?
Yeah, there's basically two or three different philosophies on writing. One, you plot everything out, you outline it all. You go from here to here to here to here, and you've already written it before you've written it. The other way, you start at the beginning and just keep writing until you find the end.
So which one
And
do you do?
I do the second.
You do the second.
I always hated outlining. When I took computer programming, I hated doing flowcharts. I always did the program and then I did the flowchart.
Does it
So-
like take the life out of the writing process, or does it make it seem like it's,
Well,
you know, I mean, I can see the benefits because you don't end up painting yourself in the corner with a character or something, but I can also see where you've got this plan and that excitement that comes, a creative sort of rush.
Yeah.
It goes away because you're plotting through these points, these bullet points, and that may be
Well,
like you're taking a
with-
trip and knowing exactly where
Yeah.
you're going with no room for any sort of detours or
Well, for me, I didn't know who the murderer was till close to the end.
really.
No,
Wow.
I have no idea. No, I have no idea.
So you start out
this
with a
guy-
body, but you don't know. Who
I wasn't
is-
sure who did it and why they did
So
it.
how do you? That's weird because to me, sorry, it's not weird.
Yeah.
Because as a nonfiction, it's like, you know, if you don't know something, you got to go interview another source to get. If it's not making sense to me, I know it's not making sense to the readers because there's something missing here, and I'm going to go find another source who can explain it. So does that just come to you in a dream, or how does it all of a sudden? How do you
I
all of a
don't
sudden
know.
know who's going to kill?
I do a
This
lot
guy.
of. Well, I do a lot of thinking of work. Before this last year, and we went to a more program intensive at the lumberyard. We never had online inventory before.
So
Now we
in the
started
book,
on
they don't
the
have
inventory.
computers. Is
But I had a lot
is that your way
yeah.
of sorting?
Well, that was
Yeah.
in 1980.
Okay.
I placed it in 1982, so I thought,
that's right,
okay,
it
I'm
is
going to
older.
start.
Yeah.
Well, for a lot of the time, I had a lot of time to think. It was a lot of repetitive work. Not now, not so much because of the online inventory, but I had a lot of repetitive work, so I could think and do my work at the same time. So basically, it just came in when I was doing my work.
It was like in a moment, you know who it was going to be? Did you
I
know
think
who the murderer
so.
was?
I think so.
Wow.
So I remember.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like welling up from your subconscious, right?
It is,
You know,
it
and,
is,
and
very.
it was down there, and all of a sudden you just have to.
Okay, yeah.
Right,
okay,
get
this
to
makes
it, it
more
comes
sense.
out.
This guy makes more sense. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
He's the murderer.
Does anybody have any questions at this point about how this works, or what Lorraine was getting at, or I don't know if anybody has done
Yeah.
their own writing. It's fine if you don't, but
Yeah.
we've been talking a
Yeah.
while.
Well, if you
So
how about yours?
Okay.
How do you come up with
the
yours?
star and the sycamore. So I'm sort of bound by reality, but it's my own reality. But I'll just say a little. My background was that after hopping school, which was like the apex of my academic career, I was in high school, and I was really, as a student, I was terrible. I got about like a C- grade point average. And the one constant in my life was like Lorraine. My mother read to me, so I always loved books. I would love to read. So I would get books assigned in class, and it would be like, you know, it would be books that you could read in a couple days, and they were stretched out over a 16-week period, which is agonizing to me, right? Because if it's a good book, if it's a novel or nonfiction, you know, then whether, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird or, you know, Alexander Solzhenitsyn then, or A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, some of this Russian fiction. If it's a good book, I mean, I was going to sit home, I was just going to read it until I was done with it, okay? Then you come back to school, and there's a teacher who's just plotting through this thing in this most painful way, and it just, the dissecting of it would be like, all right already, you know? And at some point you're supposed to write a paper on it, which I would do, but I just felt like it had a way of just sapping the life out of a book, which, you know, you should want to rush through it. Discussing, definitely, but, you know, the way curriculum structured, you got to break it down. So anyway, that's my excuse for saying that I didn't do homework, but loved to read. And all my friends went to college, which I didn't. I had no notion that would ever happen to me. As nobody in my family had gone. And I had a series of interesting manual labor type jobs, which some of which are in the book at least. in the small town of Three Rivers, right? So, and heating and air conditioning, working at a gas station. Back then, they pay people to do that outside, asphalt paving, fixing fences, working in a factory, then Peterson Springs, the only job I ever got fired from, which was really hard to do if you were a UAW employee in the 70s. I mean, you almost had to find a body that you hid somewhere to get fired, but I managed to get fired from that place.
Well, I got fired from someplace once. So.
You did?
Yeah.
Is it here? Is it going to be in the book somewhere?
I should.
Yeah,
I should.
No.
It was an interesting situation.
But anyway, even during that period, hanging around Three Rivers, doing what kids did in the late 70s, early 80s, hanging around Three Rivers, I always still loved to read. And it was, I didn't see the disconnect in my life. And that one part of me, I was sort of intellectually curious and liked to read books. Because my friends would come home from college and studying and taking their English lit freshman classes and reading all the classics. I was like, oh, I know about that book. They're like, really? I'm like, well, it's really not that complicated. My mother worked at a library, right? So she was always bringing home books. But anyway, so that was sort of feeding that side of me. But I ended up going to college finally for heating and air conditioning, which is following my dad's footsteps as a barber and learned to trade, right? And I was really bad at working with hand tools. Cut myself, my mind wandered, I would have to redo things. When you got an acetylene torch burning at about 2,500 degrees, you got to, these are not, power tools are not the thing to use if your mind is prone to sort of drifting away, right? So I sort of failed that career anyway. Long story short, I went back and got my bachelor's when I was like 28, 29. And along the way, I took writing classes that I did well in, but never again thinking this is something, who does it for a living? So I fell into communications, which is a really broad, generic degree, and working for Borges Medical Center in public relations. Then I was able to continue in that career, right? And I worked for the Kellogg Foundation. I worked for Notre Dame, but part of me, even in public relations, I know real journalists don't see it that way. You still are using facts to support your story, right? That you're telling the story of an organization, but in the back of my mind, especially in my mid-30s, I became a speechwriter for the CEO of the Kellogg Foundation. This guy, he'd been president of Johns Hopkins, great guy, but very East Coast, Ivy League, penny loafers, button-down guy, and I had to, as a speechwriter, you've got to assume the persona and voice of somebody. And again, he was a good man, and I respected him, but I'm trying to write like a white, 60-something Ivy League graduate, right? So I had to change my writing style to meet what he wanted. Some of the stuff's not really stuffy and dry to me, but hey, it's okay, And about that time, I'd always been interested in the essay. And I think when people think of essays, you tend to think of something you might have to write to get into college or something you wrote in school. But for me, it was really a combination of being able to write about something that's real in your life, but using facts, which you get at through, like any good journalist would, being accurate in reporting those facts, but also weaving in your own personal experience. Because, in the first person, as a journalist, you don't use the word I, right? The I is not something you use. You're there to tell a story in third person. As I said earlier, if you can't figure out what you want to say, you go interview with somebody who gives that to you. And I'm in my mid-30s. I got something to say, okay? I just don't want to be a mouthpiece for the CEO. I just don't want to write news releases and stories for this organization and trumpet their party line. I want to start doing my own thing. And the essay came to me when I was going to Michigan State for Master's in Journalism, ironically, that this could be something that can incorporate both of those into it. And so I started writing them, and I really like it. And I did a book called Looking for Hickories, which I think is still in print. I think Tom is out of it right now. And what's that? You almost should have bought one. I should have called you just to be sure, but I need to order more. And those are set in this. So the thing I like about essays, you can write about anything. Okay, it's sort of this kitchen sink approach. I mean, anybody that something is doing in your life about your kitchen routine, about being part of an organization that is going out of business, being part of an organization that is growing rapidly. You can write it about death, about taxes, about all these different aspects of your life. The essay can be a vehicle for writing about that, as long as I think it tells a story that people can relate to. And with this book, getting back to the more of the personal themes. So just one thing, the title, "The Star and the Sycamore." So I live out in off Moore Park Road, right down the street from the Center Park Methodist Church. The person who built that church, they built 3 or 4 brick houses at the time. It was a mini suburb, right? And these were brick houses in the 1860s. And I go walking down this road at night with my dogs all the time. It's very peaceful, Hutchinson Road. And I got interested in the stars, so I, getting to know the constellations, and there's an essay about that. But I noticed one night that the dog star, which is Sirius, I was walking and there's a sycamore tree, and it was almost like a Christmas decoration. It was a bright, cold night. It was hanging right there, almost like the Christmas star. And I started thinking about the connection between this sycamore tree and that star, because a tree is really light incarnate, right? Any tree you see, its growth is directed toward the sun, especially in the fall when the leaves are off. You can see how it's turned and cantilevered its branches toward the source of light, which is where it gets the food for photosynthesis, right? And its shape has assumed the light, right? And you can see obviously the metaphor in people's lives. The things that we've turned to in our lives that has been light, that's brought us life. The dark things we've turned to that have maybe brought us harm or helped us be not formed the way we are. And I could see that connection between this star, which is billions of years away, and this tree on Earth. And it wasn't just some fanciful, I thought about it, well, that's kind of out there, but it's true. Every tree that's ever grown is a reaction to light. So anyway, it seemed significant to me at the time for a title, and I needed something in that word. But a couple things that I think, again, writing about a local place that's really helps that self-discovery. And one example is out on Hoffman Road. Everybody knows where the pit is right now, right? It's a CrossFit facility, which they did an incredible job of remaking that. Okay, so when I was just out of high school, first day out of high school, as a C- student, what you did was you got a job as a manual laborer at an asphalt plant. It was then called DeBoer Materials. They had a gravel mine there. They made their asphalt. They would take the gravel and they would sort through it and sell it, sand, all the different products. And it's funny because it was called the pit then, but it was lowercase, right? And what a pit does basically, as I learned later, you can still see the remnants of a high hill there along Hoffman Road. And there was a glacial moraine that started, and the glacial moraine it's sort of like the piles and hills and remnants of the glacier that came through. And it starts down Newburgh Township, where Swiss Valley is a series of hills. It's sort of like west at 131, and it stretches in some way all the way up to Timber Ridge ski slope, right? So there was glacial hills, and I found out from something that I read here from Chet Schaefer, who is this local columnist, sort of like a male in Mavonbeck, Three Rivers.
Oh, yeah.
And he was really well. He would write for the Saturday Evening Post, Detroit News. He had this really messy office, this rat hole. And he wrote an essay about a place called the Knobs. And the Knobs were what the gravel pit is now. And the Knobs were a series of hills that came much further out to 131. And it sounded really beautiful, kind of woody. But it must have been the 40s and 50s where they started turning the area into gravel mines. So those hills became, all the roads and probably asphalt parking lots that we see. So anyway, I went out there to write a column for the commercial news back at the time about they were having the Melting Man, this bike competition out there where they're doing like a 50-mile bike race with these knobby tire bikes on these muddy trails out there. It was really cool, and I got to thinking more about the place because I'd worked there, and I remember that my great-grandparents on the other side had a house there, and they had an orchard there, and their orchard used to go back up into those hills, and I knew about that, and I knew that they moved over here from somewhere in Europe. So how do I make that connection, right? Because it was important for me to know that, because what I started to get to was my grandparents had come there as immigrants from the Sheb, Hungary, and my grandpa was a shoemaker. He had a shoemaking shop downtown Three Rivers, and they built this farm out there. They planted these 700 trees, and so they saw, and a hilly place like that is good for fruit trees because you get what's called air drainage, you get the frost, and it was good topography, and they recognized that. And then after my grandpa died, they sold the farm, and just like really quick, my grandpa thought that they kind of got screwed on it. That guy came in, cut all the orchard down, and wanted to mine the gravel. So here I come along a generation later. I'm this 19-year-old long-haired kid, who's working at this place. And in my own way, I was like abetting the destruction of this, right? And it doesn't mean that we don't need gravel and asphalt and sand to do what we do, but you know, my grandparents had came there and they built a life there, you know, and it gets kind of emotional for me. They had 10, 11 kids. That was the center home where everybody went to, and a generation later, we're going out there with front end loaders and gouging it out and trucking it off and selling it away. I'm like that. I had no idea about that as a kid. So anyway, the essay allowed me to find out about their life, and it turned out they're from Sept, Hungary, which is now Sarajevo, Serbia. It's a part of the world where, you know, Yugoslavia, where things change hands. And I remember as a kid hearing that, but from my grandma, that they could hear the Danube River, which is one of the major rivers in Europe, when they were. So I looked on the place, and of course, the miracle now of like Google Earth. Here's a picture of Sarajevo. It looks a lot like Three Rivers. You see this grid of streets, you see trees, it's about the same size. And it's something, hey Holly, welcome. And one of the things also what's really profound about me was Sarajevo is like the apple growing center of that part of Europe. So they knew apples and they knew rivers. So when he moved here and had his shoe shop just a stone's throw from the river, when they went out there and started their own orchard, I mean, they brought some of that with them, right? They brought their life with them. They brought part of that connection with them. So again, that's the type of thing. It's probably boring to some people. It's interesting to me, but the challenge is to write about that in a way that you connect with, because everybody has in their past, and you know, genealogy is such a passion for people. This is Holly Stevenson. I don't know if you're director or presidente of the St. Joseph County Historical Society, and Becky Shank, who's another really amazing historian. So, you know, you care about your life, and I think you try to make some connection to your ancestors, and that's what the essay allowed me to do. And I tell the story of how I worked at the Grit. I ended up getting sort of fired out there or demoted. And, you know, but it played a role in my life, and it's like, here's this local place. And there's another one there about the Boys Dam, which is really a big deal for me because I fished there, and it's this wonderful little slice of wilderness. It's called the River Gone Wild in the city that I can still fish as a guy almost 60 now to see. So I do it because I care about it, but I also do it because Wendell Berry has a great quote, but that I'm going to mess up, but every place has its own meaning and value. You know, we live in Three Rivers, we live in the Midwest, it's flyover country, nothing happens here. Had this debate along with people of my family, nothing great can happen here. You know, just like Jesus, can nothing good come from Nazareth, he was asked, right? I mean, you know, prophet is not with honor except in his own native place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a typical failing, and you combine that with the Midwestern nice and the politeness and that sense of sort of, aw shucks, you know. And I told this to Deborah Hawk Frost, it either comes out as this sort of really goofy boosterism about your hometown, because it's not perfect, it's not wonderful, or the fact that nothing good can happen here. But good things do happen here. You've seen what's happened. The fact that this bookstore exists, that people would come down and listen to local authors, is really important. The fact that we have a library downtown now, that we have these stores, it can happen anywhere. And I would say that our accessibility to stories here, the fact that we're not living in some United States or Generica, like the malls of Portage, the people of Portage are very good, but it doesn't have any sense of place to it, right? This place is rich in these stories. My stories are because I lived for a while. Your own stories because you're a newcomer here. You found something here other people don't. You know, I think of, you know, Robin Kirsten, Vander Gieser-Rietsma, of what they've done with the Huss Project and World Fair, things like that. Is building a sense of community to me is about getting involved, but as a writer, it's about helping them tell the story of the place and sort of trying to honor that. And that's what I try to do. And you're always trying to make it interesting, because the thing with the essay is that the personal essay, so there's personal part of it. There's a point where if it gets too creepy, I've heard it described, it's like, you know, you're pulling through somebody's underwear drawer of a relative that died or something, right? You want to give people facts about your life, but I mean, too much is too much, you know? It's like you don't, so you're using your own life as an entree into this world. And for me, it's just fun to be able to write about the pit out there that people drive by every day. I didn't know about it, or Ruth Hoppen and what she did as an educator, you know, because lifting that up, because it brings more meaning to our community when we know where we've been, so we can see where we're going. So if in the future, if they want to rename that because of a corporate gift, the Walmart Elementary School, we can say, no, actually, this is really rooted in a person who is important and valued, and we want to. There's a reason why it's called this. There's a reason why Barrow School is called Barrow School. Holly probably knows that. There's a reason why Huss School is called that. Names are important. I know naming rights. Pay a lot of money for naming rights. I worked at Notre Dame. I get that, right? but you better be hanging over a lot of money, to do that. So, Three Rivers, it's a distinct place of its own. I think it's wonderful. The Three Rivers, the confluence of it, the history here, make it a place that deserves to be written about. It deserves to be read about, we think, so we write about this stuff. Yeah, did you guys see the PBS documentary on the St. Joe River, by the way? That's going to be it's going to be when's it going to be aired on WNIT, right? Channel 34. Was it last night? So
A couple nights ago, actually.
so
Oh, figures.
That was last night too.
They had
Be again on Wednesday. This next week, 34 Channel 2.
So it's great because it's a documentary about the St. Joseph River, which is the lifeblood of of so much of what's about the state and what it's done and what it's been. I like the perspective it tells it from. It tells it from manufacturing, the history, the sort of archaeology, the science, just the meaning it still has in people's lives, and man, the things they can do with drones. That's the thing, man. If it wasn't for drones, it's really good. But Becky and Holly are both in it, so you can hear what they have to say. You guys do a great job, by the way. So that's, to me, that's the value of this type of writing. But I would also say that you don't have to make it a book. If I know so much about my family because my mother wrote up this family history on a manual Smith Corona typewriter, by the way, and she got this stuff from my uncle, and it would take weeks and months to get these materials in, and she wrote over there to Chef Hungary and got a record of a marriage, not a license, but whatever they would call that. But now with all the genealogy information you have out there, which kind of cuts both ways, and you start giving somebody a blood sample, in my opinion. But there's a richness there that we can mine, and you could do it. You could do it through this type of writing. You can do it through poetry. You can do it through fiction. You could do it through music if you're so inclined. But anyway, that's quite a long diatribe. If any, I think I'll stop there. And you've got some other books.
I was going to mention some of these other books. Now these are fantasy. These two are fantasy books, but it basically got its start because I was writing some sarcastic essays about some of the decisions that the city councils were making. And in one case there is a pothole in the middle of Main Street, and it grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and they start fishing out of it. And this is basically a fantasy about what would happen if it was a small town but it was magical. And this is written in more of a, I don't know if any of you have read Anne of Green Gables, those series of books. They are written, each chapter it's its very own story, but it basically goes for an ending. Like, for example, at the end, Anne gets adopted, but it's all these various stories that she has and various things. That's what I was trying to do with this. And then I had these essays that I'd written a long time ago. I basically wrote stories to go in between the essays about this family that moves into this town and that they don't realize is magical. Then they discover that they're magical too. And that's the second book that I wrote. I have a third, but I haven't got that far yet.
So is it the city commission on the cover or something? Or
yeah, this is actually the city commission
Right.
of a town called River Creek.
Totally fictional.
So
I'm sure.
totally,
There's
totally
no-
fictional. Yeah, well, one of the guys, he keeps coming like he's getting drunk, but he's getting drunk on apple juice. It's not alcohol; it's apple juice.
Have you had Corey Lake hard cider? Tried that?
No, I have not.
That'll do it. So are their brandy.
Yeah. These other two are pure fantasy. Somebody challenged me to write a play once, but that is a fantasy too. And
That's
I
a
was
beautiful
trying
cover, man. Who did that?
My friend, her name is Sherry Watson.
Oh, I
she
know
goes
her.
by
She-
the name
she-
of
yes,
Sherlock.
right.
Yeah,
I've seen her stuff before.
yeah. She did this. She also did that.
I got to
She is
say,
one
the
of our
one thing that
cartoonists.
stopped me from being a journalist, the big turnoff, that I would have to cover things like city commission meetings. I know it's essential. You need to have that coverage, but man, that is, you know,
Yeah.
good to you, Robert. You got to do it. The citizens need to hear about
Yeah.
it. But, you know, just sit there and take all these notes and go back at 11 o'clock at night and say, wow, I've got a deadline. I've got to spend the next 2 hours trying to, I mean,
Yeah.
we need that watchdog of the media, but it's, anyway.
This one, the first story is something I wrote about it's almost 30 years ago now. And I put it on Amazon. It's the first thing I've ever put on Amazon. I finally made it go free. The first day it went free, it
So it's a free download?
sold
Wait.
15,000 copies.
What?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, and I'm looking at this going,
So they just download
Why-
a PDF of it, or what is
yeah,
it?
it's a Kindle.
Right, it's a
Kindle.
Okay.
They downloaded, I think it's got 15,000 downloads.
15,000 downloads.
And I can't figure out why. I really can't.
The price was
It
right,
wasn't
certainly,
that. Yeah,
but-
it was zero.
But even so, that's there must be, it must have caught some ripple or some.
I don't know. Well, somebody said
know?
somebody called it a fantasy romance, and I'm going, no, that wasn't what I intended. I didn't. She didn't fall in love with anybody. So, it's about a story about a princess who gets raised by a dragon, and she thinks all the princessly duties are like wearing armor and swords back and learning how to defend herself and so forth, and she's very naive, but yeah, I cannot figure that one out. I still cannot figure that one out.
I mean, once you write something, you kind of got to let
I
it go
wrote
of it,
30.
right?
Yeah, I
You know?
wrote 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago.
I've heard Neil Young say about a song. I mean, once a song is out there, it's yours, not in the copyright
Yeah.
trademark
Yeah.
infringement sense, but it is yours to sort of interpret for what it's going to be, and it's 1 or 15,000 downloads. It must have really
But
took off.
I'm
people,
looking
you know?
at that. I'm going, what?
So
in
was
the
it
world?
priced first and it wasn't selling until
Oh yeah, you have to price it. The least amount you have to price is 99 cents. It was not
you
selling.
didn't want to? It wasn't, huh?
It
Well.
was not selling. And, the first day it went free, I was looking at the numbers and I'm going, what? And of course I was thinking, gee, if I had gotten the money for that, it would have been nice. But
Wow, that's
but
so.
it's amazing.
That could be a movie, right? A princess raised by a dragon, or
Yeah.
maybe animated, probably.
Yeah, this is
I didn't know you
I
did
bought
that.
that. I bought that picture. There's various spots where you can buy the copyright to these pictures. So, yeah. Anyway, well, actually, there's another one, but I didn't see it up there. That was my therapy book.
Therapeutic as in terms of
getting
exercising.
through high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my way of getting back to the bullies.
I remember when we were talking about this. I did have one high school class that really focused on writing, and it was you had to write a term paper, right, which is a pretty basic thing. But the research was supposed to all happen. Now, the research was supposed to have happened during a period of time when you play basketball outside and like to fish, so that was part of the problem. But for me, the other thing was that this teacher had this really fetish about all this research had to be handwritten on these little note cards, 5x7 note cards. Your sources all had to be in there. And I swear, he said more about writing stuff on note cards than even about the whole thing. That was all the mechanics of it, the minutia of having all these note cards. So when I turned mine in, I had about that many note cards, because he expected to have that much. That was like how they counted. Your sort of academic output was
Yeah.
with the note. Now I get what he was saying is that you're not supposed to make things up. You're supposed to accurately research this feature. You're supposed to put the time into it to get the background, but how you tell a story, how you put it all together, how you make it want some people to read. It's like that wasn't even an issue. Now, supposedly he said, I'm preparing you when you go to college to do more of this, which doesn't make somebody want to go to college or be a writer, right?
Exactly.
It's like being an artist and have to focus on the chemical composition of all paint and how the canvases made or something, which is all good to know. But he probably had his reasons, but I think that's the flaw in education. It can sap the life out of a creative process, and I think the same thing can happen with music to some extent. I had a daughter who played an instrument in middle school, like most of us do, and it's a passing fancy. I'm not saying it went bad for her, but to play the instrument, she had to be part of the band. It's like she didn't want to be in the band. Now, a band is cool. It's great. A lot of people are in it, but it's almost like you have to feed into the system and be part of this product in order to play the instrument, and that's. I think other motives can come into play in the education process. And for your kids especially, you take something that's supposed to be fun and spontaneous, and you turn it into some adult-driven, metric guided sort of process. And I'm not blaming the teachers because that all comes down from the Department of Education and the legislature, but I think kids need the space, especially to be creative with what they want to do. They have this God-given talent to see the world in a certain way, or have certain gifts, and how do you nurture them without burying them beneath the sort of just Dullsville rigor, the studies. And Holly's been a teacher. She was an art teacher. I'm sure she found a way to do that. But I just try to keep that in mind with my own kids, and that I think this type of writing, nobody told Lorraine how to do this, right? You were never given the assignment to make up a story about a princess raised by a dragon, write a book about it, right? But that creative urge, if you nurture that in people, when they come up with something like that, they can think they can do it. And I mean, all the books in this room, all the way around you, came with some creative impulse. And it came with somebody thinking that they could make it happen, right? Finding Winnie, Aim for the Skies, Not Yeti. It's kind of cool. All these books, if you're not taught to sort of stimulate and nurture your creative process, how's that going to happen? You don't start out with some formula. It probably didn't start out as a class assignment. So, teaching people those skills to do that with their own kids and give them an opportunity, which I think books provide. I know I'm lecturing here.
No, yeah. Well, I'm on Facebook with a lot of authors, too. And a lot of them I actually know in person. And I happen to think I should probably mention that I was actually professionally published in a Star Trek book. It has nothing to do with the brand new series coming up, but it was called Strange New Worlds. This was about 2005. So I got to know a lot of these Star Trek authors, and I still know them to much.
So are these the underground ones, or the?
These are the above ground ones.
These are the above ground. So they've got the stamp of approval from the mothership.
Oh yeah,
whatever.
They go through the licensing. They go to pocketbooks. They go through the licensing, or at least have. Some of them aren't writing so much for Star Trek anymore. And I was just thinking, I was sitting next to you. I've talked more here than I've been on panels at conventions, and I was sitting next to a gentleman. His name is Peter David. He has written all sorts of books. He's written all sorts of comic books. I've got I don't know how many credits, and I'm thinking, I just read his book, and I'm sitting next to Peter David. What can I say? Peter David can't say. Of course, he can carry on a conversation by himself, but
writers like to hear themselves talk, as my wife will tell you. Yeah,
and a bunch of others that I contacted, I just admire.
But you had your own thing to say, right? I mean,
yeah.
The thing is, your own niche or what you had to say is still valuable. It just isn't what.
Yeah, what? Yeah.
You may not be as totally Star Trek yourself as some of these people are, to the point of almost.
No.
Like I said, Dave Barry says there's a fine line between hobby and mental illness. So you can.
Most of them are good.
You can cross that.
Most of them are. Most of them don't have that mental illness.
They don't.
No. They're fans, but they don't. They have their life.
So it's interesting that to be approved by Star Trek to write about it. Do you have to? You don't submit to work to review, or how does that? You have to pay for that? Because you're making money off the Star Trek Enterprise,
if you
right?
go through, you basically have had to write a Star Trek book, to go through pocketbooks. You basically have had to have written your own book and gone through an agent and an editor and been professionally published, and then they might consider taking you on. as their starter
So
cover. But
they
you
must
have to
be
go.
they
You have
must
to
be
go
a
through
license by the franchise to
Oh,
do
yeah.
that, and then no doubt there's
Yeah,
sharing
there's
profits with
a license there, and then they send it out to whatever is running it now, whether it's Paramount, I believe it is. And they have to look at it and approve it, and then it comes back, and then they get. And it takes about a year and a half, I think.
when you're that reminds me of something. When people get started off, they want to know, how do I get published? What do I want to do? And I
Yeah.
used to get asked by interns when I worked at the Kellogg Foundation, how do I get published in the New Yorker? I'm like, well, you start by doing a really good job with the assignment that I just gave you. You start, and it was not being flip. I said you start by becoming a really good writer, because yeah, there's always some element of happenstance or randomness sometimes that will get you published somewhere. But for the most part, editors have a really acute eye. They know what they're looking for. They know what the quality is, and when your writing has that, it will stand out. And so even though they got 100 submissions, so that, I think for me, taking any opportunities that I could have to write, and I know one of the first ones I had, the Kalamazoo Gazette used to, they would give about this much column inches, I don't know, 8 or 10 column inches to the Nature's Way, it was called, this section the Kalamazoo Nature Center had, where you could write a little essay, and they had somebody who wrote it. Emma Pitcher was really good. She wrote some books on it, but as a volunteer, that was something you could do, and I never would have thought of that. You think if you're a volunteer at the Nature Center, you go out there and you help, clean up trailers or something. But they needed somebody to do that, so it gave me a format for writing. I didn't make any money for it, but if I want to write about sassafras trees or something, or when buffalo first roamed on Prairie Ron, which is up by school, Grandpa found that interesting. Again, it was taking that opportunity, and it gave me what you then call clips, right? It gave me a source of published writing. I mean, I don't care if you're writing for your church bulletin or a fan blog or whatever the weekly paper is called here. I quote Eric Friedman, a journalism professor, it doesn't do any good in your hard drive. If you wrote it, try to find a home for it. Create your own blog, and certainly, now people with their own social media posts on Instagram. If you're a writer when you say you are and you start writing stuff, you don't get a seal of approval. That's the weird thing about it. I mean, you kind of want a doctor who passed their boards and had a medical education, but good writing is good writing. It's very democratic. You can have a high school education. You can have it. If you can write something that people want to read and are interested in, then that's all you need. That's your only entree to it. But you probably do need to just continue to do it and do it and do it, perfect. And like you said, you become your first editor because you read so many books that you see your writing here and you know where you want it to be.
Where I fall down on self-promotion. I really do. If you hadn't thought of this, I would never have thought of coming down here.
It's the cookies, man. See,
Yeah.
you guys got a lot of cookies to eat too. Yeah, Becky.
What year did you graduate from theater?
1977. That's a long time ago.
So,
Yeah.
did you know someone from the class of 74 named Kevin through theater?
The name sounds familiar. My sister was in that
74.
class. 74.
Not me.
Well, he is today nearing retirement with the U.S. Geological Survey. And he's been back in Michigan for the last few years mapping the geological map of Michigan, and he did Southwest Michigan a few years ago. And so I've been trying to talk him into coming back for some research or something, because there's so much to be written about our glacial landscape
Oh, yeah.
in this part of Michigan, and it was just touched on in the PDF. But I love your books because every chapter is complete within itself, so you can start at the back, in the middle.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
you don't
not
have to go.
sequential. I don't have to have a beginning, middle, end like she does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had your first book with me when I was stranded on the train in January, just east of the Mississippi there in Wisconsin, a long time, and there were about a dozen of us on the lower level of that railroad car, all the way from Oregon to New York,
Oh my goodness.
and we all got acquainted, and I said, oh, I got this cool book, do you mind if I read you a few?
Wow, talk about a captive audience.
Yeah.
And they loved it.
They stay awake the whole time, or was it? What time was
The
it?
best, that little chapter I liked best, and I think it was the biggest hit too,
Yeah.
And they're singing hymns together, and they're interacting with each other and working together. And then on your way home, you drive by the ranch house. There's the picture window and the blue glow, and everybody's staring at the screen.
Yeah.
Contrasting the two families. That was her coast to coast.
Wow. Well, thank you. No, it's,
Wow.
it's just
Is Ruth Hoffman buried at Moore Park Cemetery?
that'd be something to ask the historical society.
I'm not sure which one she's
That's
They'll
really
be out.
cool because and I thought of talking about. I know schools don't like people coming in and telling them what they should teach about, but that have to be relatable in some way. It could be incorporated in a curriculum somewhere. I know there's some flexibility with curricular goals to be able to add some aspect, especially the connection she has to careers in STEM. You know what I mean? As a first and a role model, it's like, make use of that, at least in some reference, some way this person was there. But you've got a lot more research on it. But
Well, see, I never had any idea until he said something. Because when I was a kid, I wasn't interested in history, so.
I've got Ruth's collection of red seaweeds at the Sloan House. I also have a
so that's what she was diving for in the South Pacific, was the getting seaweed collections for her.
And she had written a letter to a niece all about this collecting seaweed. But in 2014, I thought, I'm just going to Google it and see what comes up. And I actually got a response from Missouri that she was part of a group of women who explored caves there in the 1880s. And she got credit for identifying previously undiscovered crating. And I'm thinking,
Holy cow!
women in the 1880s were along dresses
She-
and stuff, and they're crawling around.
She must have been 4 times smarter than any man in Three Rivers. No wonder she was not finding
She was something
somebody
She's
here.
having more fun.
Huh? It's more fun.
more
Are you
fun,
kidding
fun than
me?
anybody.
Ruth Hoppen discovered.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's. So you could write about that. You could write about a historical novel about that. She could have like a Polynesian boyfriend when she's diving for the seaweed up there. You know.
In 1893, I think it was.
Wow.
She was addressing the Pioneer Society of St. George County Senator. She
Wow.
was in ill health and had come back. I think she died soon after. And at the conclusion of her remarks, she explained about the loss of native species on the prairie and the invasive species that the settlers had brought with them. And, I guess I see this in your writing too. I love it. and one of the things about your history, of course, that you were telling about when you were younger, so much of education is oriented to people who are visual learners. But I think people like you, and I know I'm in that category, about 20% of us are auditorial learners. And you have to get past a certain point in life where all of a sudden sort of all comes together. I was at Hoffman in 1945 or 46, and they kicked me out of town then, because I had to go back and live with my parents, instead of my grandparents, and my dad came back from World War II. But then I went to country school for second grade and part of third grade, and that was a whole eye-opening experience because we had kindergarten, 8th grade all in the same room with the same teacher. And that actually rescued me in teaching. The first year I taught in the 5th grade class, I had 27 kids, 14 of them were detained before I got them. They couldn't even read words beyond A, N, and B, some of them. And learning about learning styles and maturity and things like that.
Oh, yeah. I
Looking
imagine.
back on that experience at country school.
Imagine you and I had different
Well-
learning styles too.
What we got? It's
Anyway, your books are charming.
yeah. Looking for Hickories is my other book. This is Star of the Sycamore, and
The PBS has sort of interfered with my getting into that. I've only read 3 or 4 chapters.
Well, it's just not sequential, and everything in it, you know, there's some in there that I'm not as crazy about, right? But
There's some books.
some things need to be written about, and
They're not signed. Or
so
A plus.
April, what's that?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's better than C- I graduated from high school with, so I'll take that. You know,
Average.
well, should we?
yeah.
Tie
So
it up, or-
what we do? Yeah, I guess it's this is a lot. These aren't the most comfortable chairs in the world. So if anybody have any questions or comments or things Nance, anything to add? Anything?
They're all of them are
Any rebuttal from my wife back
I'll
there?
sign them. No,
Or
you know.
my wife Nancy Springer back there. Nancy Hubbard Springer.
Where is she?
She's back there by
Burying the
the.
books.
Thank you. She's got
I
the
won't-
little truth meter going on.
I've been.
Will you sign?
Yeah, we'll sign books, but
I just took this picture in one of the Hubbard fields on Van Zeelis Road.
yeah.
And of course, you probably saw the story on the front page of the,
Oh, I was going to mention that, right?
about Tom Talbot's explorations. And of course, you know, the stone tool collection we have at the Sewing House, I think from all previous conferences around Victoria and Harvard Lake. So we have a wonderland, and there's something else.
So what is in that picture, Becky? I don't see what that is. It's a
It's a piece of rock.
it's a piece of rock,
Yeah.
but it's significant in some way because he took a
Oh.
picture of it, right?
It's the same color as that piece of church that Tom found
So,
over at.
so
Oh,
in,
for
in
heaven's
case
sake.
you're wondering, if you don't subscribe to commercial, Rick Corda is a former writer there.
Yeah.
There's this big archaeological dig going somewhere in northeast St. Joseph County. He can't reveal it under pain of lawsuit and death because this is really ancient stuff they're finding on this farm, and the digs are going on. There's a U of M archaeologist there about the ancient peoples from I forget the name of the epic or whatever era it is. What is it?
Clovis.
The Clovis people, you know, and
Oh, yeah.
So again, did anybody see that movie on Netflix about the British archaeologists? Remember what was that called? I can't remember. Remember that, Nance? What? Called The Dig. It's really well done.
Oh,
Really well
okay.
done. It's right before World War II, and was it a Viking boat or something? Viking boat on this woman's land, and he's what's that?
The husband had died, and so she decided for the dig to go on or something.
Right. And she was like, I don't know if I think she was dying. She was terminally ill or something. Again, it's incredible. Look it out because this guy who plays that role, this British guy, and it's based on a true story. And it's funny because he was a person too who had all this knowledge of archaeology. But back then, I mean, he was a digger. He used a shovel, so he's supposed to just be the manual labor because you got to be really careful. You can't go in there with a backhoe like you would at the gravel pit on Hoffman Road. And so he discovered this and he knew all about it, but they didn't trust him because he wasn't a PhD from Oxford, right? He didn't get vindicated until it was like years later, right? They said that he finally got credit for his research they wouldn't give to him. But it's just cool again that somebody who has a really just one more thing on that because I work part-time at the Nature Center now, and some of the people who know the most about like bird banding, butterflies, are people that don't have PhDs, but they've been doing it for 20, 30 years. They're so consumed by it, year after year, season after season. They really know more. They just haven't published their research or got their doctorate from it. And I think that's again a form of local history, local natural history, like this guy had. That is really cool if you can be sort of the keeper of the flame, right? Who maintains that knowledge and passes it along. Anyway, wah 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 wah.
Oh,
Are we?
we're on Facebook Live, but none of you are on it.
So, all the people on Facebook Live who are watching,
Yeah.
if you're within driving distance, please come here and get a cookie from Gigi's Cookies. They're great.
Yeah.
Some chocolate milk. It's a
Oh,
little
it's
warm
great.
now, but it's still good. Okay.
So, okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.